This is the part about practice that a lot of people don't get to see. You're up before daylight, you're out all day, the weather is oblivious. It doesn't matter what the weather is, you got to go. 30 degrees in Florida, 15-mile-an-hour winds, breathing vapor. People don't go fishing. Pro fishermen, we got to go fishing. We got to find fish regardless of the conditions. So that's one of those things that you may want to factor in when you see the guys weighing the big stringers in and you think, boy, I could go be a pro fisherman. Get up about 5 o'clock when it's 30 degrees out and go try and find a bass in Florida. To give you a little idea of what's going on here, obviously from the wave action we've got a stout north wind here on Lake Okeechobee. Just left the Leesburg tournament. Today's the first day of practice for Okeechobee. We had a 2-day layoff in between and right back at it about 4 hours south of where we were up in Leesburg. And this cold front has just had the grips on us. I mean, it's just been terrible. And you couple that with about a 20-knot wind, and it just makes for some really, really rugged fishing. These are the kind of days I wish I had an office job, which is not very often that I feel that way, but today I really do feel that way. I mean, it's cold. You can't tell by my dress. It's really cold. What I've done, I've picked a large grass flat that's outside of a major spawning area on the south end of the lake, and I've got a drift bag out, and I'm just covering the outside edges of this vegetation. There's cattail reeds, and there's lily pads, and there's joint grass, or what some people call maiden cane. There's a lot of mixture of different types of vegetation. The water's clear. And I'm just going to drift through this area with a spinnerbait and try and, you know, happen on some areas that maybe have some concentrations of fish. When the wind's blowing this hard, it's really nice fish. Oh, that's a good one. There we go. That's a good start for the day. Whoop. Beautiful fish. That's a really good start for the day. But I pitched that spinnerbait into the edge of that lily pad and just worked it out, and the wind's just, you know, smoking. You just don't really be real detailed on your cast. Just cover a lot of water, and there's a good start. All right, good deal. You gotta be kidding me. I must have had a bad spot in my rod. I thought I felt something when I swung that fish in the boat. It broke my darn rod. You know, the rough water and the pounding these rods take in the rod locker with graphite, a lot of times all it takes is just a little nick or a score on your rod, and any little weak spot translates into a broken rod. And there goes a $100 fishing rod. You know what? When you're a pro fisherman, you don't pay for fishing rods if you got the right people to work with. Daggone it. I still hate breaking equipment. I hate that. You know, a lake like Okeechobee is so vast. It's one of the largest lakes in the United States. Probably, if not the largest, short of the Great Lakes. And it's so vast, you have to pick an area. You have to pick an area and spend a day. You can't go running around the lake. You take your map, and you pick an area, and you drive there, and you put in, and you spend a day fishing there, and try and treat it like a little lake. Dissect what that area has to offer. Areas like South Bay, where I'm at now, is a traditional area in January. It's traditionally a good place to be. A lot of spawning goes on in South Bay. That's why I picked this. And the fact that there's a good amount of vegetation that breaks up that dirty water. There's some pretty water. It is really clear in here. We've got the main lake way out there, and we've got a lot of vegetation between me and the main lake. And even though the wind's howling in here, it's not dirtying the water up because the vegetation blocks that silt, and just it's like a giant screen filter. And that's what you got to have a lot of times. In Florida, if you're fishing muddy water and silty water, you don't get bit. You've got to stay in clear water. When we were up at Leesburg about that tannic water, that black acid water that comes out of the backwaters and the swamps. That's another thing you stay away from. If you can stay away from the black water, you can stay away from the muddy water. Kind of that good brown clear water is what you want. That's where you catch it. You know, when you've got wind like this, the best thing that you can do is cover water. Slowing down, fishing methodic presentations like worms and jigs, they're great when the sun's shining and it's calm. You get clouds and overcast, particularly a lake like this that has lots of vegetation and clear water. You need to get out there and fish a moving bait, cover a lot of water, and try and put yourself in areas that have groups of fish. You're not going to catch every fish, but when you get in a place that has a number of them, one or two will come up and tag a moving bait. If you have to later on, once you've located an area that you feel comfortable with, you can slow down and fish, you know, worms and jigs, things like that through them, and put the pieces together. Initially, in practice, you guys out there fish club tournaments, local, regional tournaments, whatever. Use practice to cover water. Spend a lot of time moving around, especially if you get a day like today. It doesn't happen very often if you get this kind of conditions overcast in Florida. They usually will get after it when it does, even if it is cold. Water temperature is about 60 degrees. It's dropped. It was about 64, 65 last week, and now it's dropped down to 60. 4-degree drop in temperature is pretty darn significant on Florida bass. You know, when you're fishing this way on these big grass flats, casting accuracy is not really an issue. So I'll throw my spinnerbait on a big rod, like a 7.5 foot or 7-foot pitching rod, and use heavy line. I'm using 20-pound line, and it doesn't really matter the line diameter. If you can throw it a long ways, you should use the heaviest line you can get away with. If you look at this cover that these fish are in, it's thick. And you get a 4, 5, 6 pounder or better, it's like you can catch a 10-pounder on any cast. You get a big fish on, you're going to want some heavy line to get them out. Oh, he's down that grass. Come on. Man, they get you right in that stuff immediately. There he is. God, he's on water up the grass. Look at the stuff on him. Another nice one. That's 2 fish in about 200-yard stretch right there. They're not giant by Okeechobee standards, but under these conditions, there's got to be quite a few fish here to be able to get a couple of bites like that. It's encouraging. All right. I better save the spot on my GPS. Everything out here looks the same. You think a spot, you could go right back to it, and you can familiarize yourself with it, but there's just miles of grass. You've got to save on your GPS to get back to an area. Let's see. Create. Let's just call it SB for South Bay. Save as, South Bay, okay, number 44. That's a start. We got a place to fish. At least one.
There's more.
You know, Lake Okeechobee went through about 3 to 4 years of drought and low water. They had the water that was the lowest it had been in 20 years 2 years ago, and now the water is about as high as it's been since 1980. So all the vegetation has grown back. Areas that used to be good are good again, and the lake is just as vibrant and full of life now as ever. The catches for tournaments have been very big. Even with the cold fronts we've been having, the Everstart tournament last week, it took right at 20 pounds a day to be in the top 3 or 4. I mean, it was just a real good tournament, and that was under cold frontal conditions. So that's showing you a little bit about how good this lake is. And it's going to take a boatload of fish to do well here. Probably take about 10 pounds a day for the top 75, which is the money cut now. And I would guess, from what I've been seeing, it'll probably take 15 to 16, maybe 17 pounds a day to make the top 12. It's going to be a lot of fish caught. There'll be a lot of fish caught in this tournament. It won't be like Leesburg. It will not be like the Harris tournament. You know, a lot of times, those tough tournaments, I seem to do better in the tough tournaments where it doesn't take quite as much. I guess I'm, you know, one of those guys that can kind of just buckle down and grit out a few fish on a tough bite. But sometimes I get buried when you have these slugfests when everybody's catching 15, 18 pounds. A lot of times that's my toughest time. You know, one of the hardest things for people to get used to when you're fishing a lake like this is the fact that there's very little bottom contour change. The biggest thing you have to dissect on a lake like this is the type of vegetation that the fish are in. They'll almost always gravitate to one type of vegetation or another, or one type bottom composition or another. A reservoir, you know, you look at cover like you might look at rock or wood or drop-off or creek channels. You don't have any of this. This is God-made. This is a natural lake. So one of the things that you have to pay attention to are what type of vegetation they're using. Are they in behind it or on the outside of it? Or in big scattered areas like this, you just basically fish all the different types of vegetation. The ones that you get the bites in are usually, you know, consistent. It's not very random. We got both of our bites out of maiden cane, which is not usually a real good vegetation habitat-wise, but that's just what they've been in. Maybe it's because the wind's funneling through it. This stuff is so pretty. You'd think you'd get a bite on any cast you make down through here. There was just that one little stretch where I got those two nice ones in, and that was it. I fished a half a mile of this stuff. That's the way it is. A lot of times you just go and go and go, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 you hit a couple. Those are the places you got to be able to go back to. There could be some beds, fish staging, getting ready to spawn. You know, it's that time of year. They should be spawning. There'll be some spawners caught in this tournament, even if this cold front is buried us. It's still, they're predicting warming temperatures through the week. Those fish will definitely have to start to get the tails bloody a little bit and start fanning some mist somewhere. Well, I think after another 1,000 yards of no bites that I need to go back up where I caught those fish and maybe go the other direction. Because this has been kind of slow down through here. Trying to take advantage of this cloud cover while I've got it. These drift bags, lifesaver. Absolute lifesaver when the wind's howling. Really slow you down and let you fish instead of blowing through real fast. There's another boat going into that little area up there. I had to get out of that wind a little bit. It was howling out there, and a lot of that water that I was looking at gotten muddy. I found a little pond back in here off of a canal that's got a lot of really pretty hydrilla. Look how green it is. A lot of times, places like this in the cold front, they'll pull off the banks and they'll get out in this hydrilla, and you can catch them on a lipless crankbait. These are gold Lucky Craft LV500. And it's just a vibration bait. And gold's always a real good color in Florida. Something about that dark water, that gold really looks good. Plus the fact that they feed a lot on those golden shiners. They have a kind of a gold cast to them. Hence the name, golden shiner. When you're fishing a lipless crankbait vegetation, you always want to be picking that vegetation. And you hit that vegetation, you snap it, and you pop it free. Most of the time, that's when you get the bite. That pause and snap, a lot of times will trigger the strike. If you're getting hung in the grass, don't get frustrated. It's usually showing your bait's getting to the right depth level. There's a couple other boats in here. A lot of times it's not because it's a good place, it's just because you're forced by the conditions to get out of the main body where the majority of the fish probably are. But you know, it's just like the same situation that we had at Leesburg, is when the weather is this bad and you have this brutal a front, you really don't know if you're fishing over the fish and they're just not biting, which is very possibly the case, or you're just not in a good area. So that's real frustrating. The plus side is the fact that they are predicting by tournament day we're only going to have nights in the 40s and low 50s and highs in the 70s. So the water is going to have to warm up a little bit, and the fish have got to bite. I mean, it's January. They bite in Florida in January when it warms up. This wind has just gotten worse and worse all day, and this temperature hadn't kicked up 5 degrees. Kind of out of necessity, I've eased back into this canal. This whole area down here in South Florida is all sugarcane related, and they have lots of old irrigation canals and things like that. And that's what I'm in right now. It's about 6 or 7 feet out here, and then we've got a little edge of matted hide. A lot of times when you get a real severe cold front like that, you can go into these hyacinths, and the water will stay a little warmer underneath it, and the fish will pull up under them, and you can take a 1 ounce weight and drop it through there with a crawfish or a plastic worm or something, and you can catch some big ones doing it. It's not very fast, but a lot of times you can catch some real pigs doing this. Sometimes when the wind blows as hard as it's blowing today, you just don't have a lot of options. When you do this kind of stuff here, you really have to use heavy line. I've got 25-pound strand monofilament on here. Braid will also work. I have a lot of confidence in this 25 mono. You break 20 sometimes on a hook set. You rarely break 25. There's a world of difference. I know a lot of guys flip with 20, but if you use 25 a little bit, you'll find out that it actually handles almost as good as 20. Sometimes it even feels a little better in your hands when you got heavy baits like this. And if you get a monster on, that extra 5-pound test will make a world of difference. You know, it's about as I expected. 9 hours and a half and about 2,000 casts, and I had 2 bites. First thing this morning in one little area. And since then, I haven't had a strike. And that is very typical of cold frontal fishing in Florida. The good news is I've still got a couple of days of practice, and they're predicting a lot warmer temperatures in the next couple of days. So hopefully I'll be able to put something together, and this thing will shake out, and I can have money finish number 5 on Okeechobee. But for now, I got a long ways to go, and that sun this time of year drops like a rock. When it hits the horizon, it's dark about a half hour later. I'm out of here. Day one was kind of tough on me. There's a couple areas I did find in practice. I fished through them, and I don't know if it's the fact that the wind had died or what the situation was. They didn't bite very good. I got lucky though, and I got one about 6.5 pounds down south, and ended up with 10.5 pounds. That's right on the money cut. It's about 70th place right now, and we've got a major wind happening right now, and I'm banking on this right here. I'm thinking with a lot of wind, they got to bite a spinnerbait. The temperature hadn't been that cold last night, so hopefully, I can catch, what I need to stay in the money. I sure would like to have event number 2 on the tour to go well. Got to get down south first. It's about 35 miles and 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to punch in on my GPS the numbers for the rim canal, and I'm going to try and run the diversion canal around and stay out of the rough water. It's going to be a ride anywhere we take it.
Six pounds and 8 ounces today, Joe.
Yeah, it's a tough tournament for me to fish. I struggled the whole week, and it's just, that's fishing. You just got to kind of pack up and move on. We got another one in a week or 2, and maybe we'll do better. You know, poor execution is something you can't have happen when you don't have a lot of fish going, and that was the story of my second day on Lake Okeechobee, and it's got me sitting in the showers early. I had 4 fish that weighed 6.5 pounds, but the key fish, the one that really would have made the difference, put me well in the money, was a 6-pounder that I had come unbuttoned about halfway through the day. I tried not to let it bother me, but then turned around and lost another 4-pounder, and that's just the kind of thing that gets going, and it can really, really make the difference between a good finish and a 90th place finish, which is where I ended up. For me, it's a 10-hour drive to Atlanta where I'll be speaking at a Bass University event, and I'll be driving most of the night. Next week we'll be on Lake Seminole, going to be in southern Georgia, right on the Georgia-Florida border. Did well there last year. I'm looking forward to that event, and hopefully it'll be a good one for me. Catch us next week on Angler on Tour.